Hello, everyone, and welcome in to another episode of the RTI Recruiting Podcast. I am Nathaniel Rutherford, the managing editor of RockyTopInsider.com, and I'm joined as a special guest by Brandon Martin of VR2. Brandon, thank you again for joining on the podcast. We're happy to have you here. We're happy to have everyone listening in. It's been a little bit. We took a little bit of a break because there hadn't been any kind of breaking news, any kind of big news necessarily for Tennessee recruiting, but there's been enough happened over last week and some stuff coming up that could be happening that I wanted to hop on here and talk about it. And we also, I took a little bit of a break last week from doing any sort of podcasting for RTI because of the passing of Johnny Majors, so kind of wanted to just kind of have, a moment of radio silence for that, and it felt weird. I wanted to do something for it, but also felt weird with me being, in my late 20s. I didn't grow up watching Johnny Majors football group, watching former football, so I didn't really feel like I could add a ton to that conversation of, remembering Majors football. So I just wanted to kind of give some radio silence in honor of him and his family and his legacy at Tennessee. But Brandon, we'll jump into here to some UT recruiting news. We have quite a bit to talk about. Like I said, it hasn't been anything kind of huge newsworthy for Tennessee. We've had a couple of things happen though. We had a decommitment. We had a kid look like he had committed, and then it never really panned out. And then we have had kind of a surprise of an in-state kid that didn't include Tennessee in his top group, and we'll talk about that. And also, what does that mean for his position moving forward? And Tennessee has one of their big targets, another in-state kid who is announcing sometime soon, and it seems like Tennessee is now trending there when they weren't, a couple months ago. So let's all start off here, Brandon, kind of the main meat of the topic I wanted to get into, and that is Nate Evans decommitting and the numbers game of Tennessee's 2021 class, because right now they're at 23 commits. There's a good chance, we'll talk about this a little bit more later, there's a good chance with Hudson Wolfe, the in-state tight end who's announcing his commitment potentially this weekend, that Tennessee can move back up to 24 commitments even after Nate Evans decommitted. Brandon, the numbers game for this class is going to be interesting. We're actually, I think, going to see Tennessee turning away kids that are, in that high 3-star to 4-star range. We haven't seen that happen. Tennessee's been desperate to get, any type of talent in here over the last 3 or 4 years, and they're not really turning away anyone who wants to come to Tennessee. That's especially a highly rated kid, necessarily. We may be seeing that because I just look at all the number of guys Tennessee's still targeting, the number of spots left in this class, and I think this one can be a little bit more inflated than previous classes, but it's not going to be a Butch Jones 2014 class or anything like that where you bring in 32 kids. So that leaves me to this point, Brandon. There are obviously going to be some kids who get pushed out in this class. That is what it is. They may have been committed to Tennessee longer, and the coaches liked them then, but now with evaluations and other kids that Tennessee is in on, it just is what it is. Nate Evans is one of those kids who I think got recruited over. NC State made him a priority. That's why he ended up going there. But Brandon, who in this class do you feel, whether it could be one person, it could be a couple of people, who do you feel the least confident about sticking with Tennessee in this class? Because we've talked about this before. And looking at this class, I think we both feel pretty confident that the vast majority of this class is pretty solid to Tennessee right now. Obviously, this is still June. We still have a whole season ahead of us. We still have several months before National Signing Day in February and the early signing period in December. So a lot can change. Relationships can change. Coaching staffs will change between now and December, now and February. But as of right now, of mid-June, who in Tennessee's class are you the least confident about sticking around and still being part of the class when it comes time to sign?
I think Tennessee's got I think the guys that they really want to keep and the guys that they're going to want to keep, I think are pretty solidly committed, and I think are pretty, like you said, pretty solid to this class. And again, things can change, but I think Tennessee has a lot of guys who are in the boat. They believe what they've been told. And a lot of the guys in this class are guys Tennessee has recruited for a long time. There's not a lot of guys in here the Vols jumped in on late. Most of these are guys they've been recruiting for a year or two pretty heavily now. These are a lot of their high-priority players, guys they've built a lot of relationships with, they've done a lot of work with. So I feel good about them keeping most of those guys. Now, you've got a few guys that I think are going to get recruited over. Kind of like Nate Evans did. And let me say this about Nate Evans. I don't think Nate Evans is a bad player. I think he's going to go to NC State, and I think he can be a really good corner for them. I like Nate Evans as a zone first corner quite a bit, actually, but that's not what Tennessee wants to do. Tennessee really liked his athletic ability. They liked his frame. They liked his height, but they were going to have to do a lot of work with him on how to be a man-to-man corner and run in space with faster receivers. His technique was going to have to develop. And quite frankly, Tennessee landed some guys who they're not going to have to teach that to, and whose skill set better fits what they want to do. And they're in on a few more guys that are not going to have that project period and that work. So I think that's what you saw there. But Evans is a good player. There are a few guys that could fall out of this class being recruited over. But now, as far as the guys Tennessee wants to keep, and my confidence level there, where it would be the players' decision to leave and not the universities or the coaching staffs, Terrence Lewis is the guy to me, and I feel really confident about Dylan Brooks, feel really confident about Aaron Willis, Katron Evans, Kamar Wilcoxon. I think these guys are committed to Tennessee. I believe they're in the boat. I believe they're very solid to Tennessee. I don't think they're going anywhere. Terrence Lewis from the beginning has been the one that was kind of surprised to see Tennessee get. And I wouldn't be stunned to see him go elsewhere, but I do think he's committed. I mean, he's committed to Tennessee right now. I think he's in the boat, but he's the one that I feel the least confident about that Tennessee would like to keep.
Yeah, I think he to me, I think is the one I would circle. And I still think right now, like I said, this is still June. We're still far away from a lot of stuff happening. I still feel more on the side of that he stays in the class than that he leaves. But he's kind of the main one that I would circle too. And I also wonder, looking at Tennessee's wide receiver group and who they have right now, and who they're still targeting a few of the guys. I don't think they get Dante Thornton, but there are a couple other kids that Tennessee could potentially be targeting at receiver. They already have a lot of guys in this class committed as wide receivers. Just on 247 Sports alone, you have 4 guys listed as wide receivers, and that doesn't even include Rock Taylor, who's listed as an athlete. So you have, I think, 4 or 5 guys who could play wide receiver at the next level. I mean, heck, Miles Campbell could even play receiver. I think he's still going to stay at tight end, but he even could be, a guy who's going to catch passes at least in some way. Jalen Wright's another guy who could catch passes as a speedy back too. I wonder whether it's a Julian Nixon or a Jordan Mosley, if one of those guys decides to move on, especially if Tennessee goes and gets another wide receiver committed in this class. I wonder, both those guys, I like both of them. I like both they bring to the table, especially with Nixon with the size he has there. But it makes me wonder, with Mosley being an Alabama kid and stuff too, how much is that going to change things? Nixon's in Georgia. What could happen there too? So I wonder a little bit about those two. And then a guy who I think this staff really likes, and obviously enough to they took his commitment, and I think he has a good upside. But I wonder about Darrell Jackson down the line. We're talking about kind of getting recruited over. I think the staff, and I looking at his film stuff, I really like his potential. I like what he brings to the table. But you kind of mentioned it there with Nate Evans, Brandon. I think with Jackson, for him, in order for him to kind of fulfill his potential, he's going to need a little more work on his craft. He's going to need to have some more things honed and whatnot. And I think the ceiling's there for him. I think the potential is definitely there for him. I just think if Tennessee goes out, obviously if they get like a Smell Munden, or if they get another pass rusher in this class who's a little more honed and refined, I think that could spell the end of Jackson in this class. And whether that's in the next couple of months or before December, I don't know. Maybe he still ends up being in this class, but he's another one who I look at and I think, I like the potential he brings, and I like what he's done on the field. And when he committed to Tennessee, I thought he could develop into a good player. But if Tennessee goes out and gets, one or two more highly rated kind of pass rushing options or a defensive end type of guys, I could see him moving on. Whether it's him being recruited over or him just deciding to move on himself, I could see him being a guy who potentially leaves this class as well.
In the receiving group, it's interesting that you bring up Mosley to me, because Matt was the first guy that said this to me in one of our group threads, and the more film that I watch, the more I kind of see it. I think Mosley could play corner. And Tennessee pretty desperately needs corners this class. You're gonna lose at least 3 guys. You could lose as many as 5. but you're losing at least 3 cornerbacks in this class. Tennessee they need bodies. They need quality bodies, and they need some guys that can contribute early to be ready to play. Mosley is a really good athlete. I do think he could potentially move to the other side. I've watched his film. After Matt said that, the more I've watched, the more I see it. I think he can make a good corner. I think the talent's there, and we joke all the time about Pruitt and Ansley. If you can play both ways at all, you're going to get a look on defense, and that may be somewhere they look for Mosley. I think for that to happen, Tennessee would have to land somebody like Deion Colsey from Athens Academy, former teammate of Laneith Whitehead. But Tennessee's in good position with Colsey. They've been in position with Colsey for a long time. We interviewed him last year when we went to watch Laneith play and interview him as well. And Deion talked about, I hear from Tennessee every day. They're one of the strongest contenders that I've got. And you're talking about a borderline 5-star wide receiver in Colsey. So I think if you were to go get him, you may see Mosley go to the other side of the ball. Rock Taylor is one that I don't feel like that one's over yet. Rock Taylor's a very good receiver. He's very talented. I just don't feel like that one's over yet. I think Auburn is going to push hard there before it's over with. And that could be an issue. Although his primary recruiter has been T. Martin, we know how he's done with the Alabama kids in the past. But I think Taylor is a kid you could see Tennessee lose out on, or could see change his mind. If you landed the Colsey, I could see Mosley maybe moving positions. Darrell Jackson's interesting to me. I agree with you. I really like his potential. My issue with Jackson is I don't know what he is. He has a good frame, but is he a defense in a 3-4 defense? Is he a defensive end? Is he an outside linebacker? Which set of skills are you evaluating for? Do you think he can play both? Do you think he can play either? Do you like him better as one over the other? There's a lot. He's kind of a tweener with that frame. And I think not being really sure what he is and knowing that he's going to need some work, and a few of the other guys that Tennessee is still in on in this class could end up seeing him get recruited over a little bit. As much as Tennessee needs corners right now, I think Jay Jones is another guy that could be, if Tennessee lands a couple of the guys that they've got their eye on in the cornerback spot, that might be one of the other guys you see do the same thing that Nate Evans did. I think that he's probably the next one to watch in that area, in that regard. A guy we have talked about that we both really like is Edwin White. Edwin White's a very good player out of Alabama. I like him a lot, and I think he can have a lot of upside. But Tennessee has signed several defensive backs that are rated a lot higher than him, and I don't see Tennessee taking more than 2 safeties with what the numbers are in this class. And they're in on several defensive backs. It's looking like they could have up to 3 safeties. And I think somebody there is going to be the odd man out. So
the defensive backs and the receivers are currently what Tennessee kind of has a stockpile of committed. And I think that's where you're going to see. We've already seen some movement. Nate Evans projected as a defensive back, and that's, he ended up moving on. I think it's where you're going to see the most movement is in those 2 areas, the defensive backs and receivers. I agree with your assessment of Rock Taylor, and I agree with what you said about Edwin White. I would be happy if Tennessee is able to keep Edwin White, because I think you and I both think he's pretty underrated of a safety, and has a really good established kind of foundation of what he can do. But if Tennessee, if they go out and land another top 250 type player at that position, I mean, like you said, numbers wise, Tennessee already has several pretty good safeties on the roster right now who they have that are older. They have a couple of young guys they've already brought in. Keyshawn Lawrence can play either corner or safety, so it'd be interesting to see kind of where he goes and how that pans things out too. And this is all obviously before the season starts and before we see how the season plays out and how these guys in the 2020 class and some of the 2019 kids too, do they move positions? How do they pan out at one position? Do they come and change positions mid-season? What all does that do? Does Tennessee have anyone unexpectedly depart from the team? How many guys do we see declare early? Because I think, as you mentioned, you could definitely see Bryce Thompson and Delonte Taylor both declare early and forego the senior seasons for the NFL draft. But, what else happens there? Did we see someone else kind of transfer out? Did we see someone else declare early in some other positions? So the numbers game is going to be a very interesting one to see play out, especially if Tennessee can go out and land some of these top guys like they're looking at, like a Marius Mims, like a Smell Bundon, and several other of these, top 200, top 100 type of players that Tennessee is pursuing. Brandon, we have a lot to cover here, so let's move on to the next topic too. And this one's going to be, it'll probably be a little brief because it's probably pretty obvious to the listeners kind of what happened here, but I want to touch on it because we haven't talked about it yet. But I think it wasn't this past weekend, but it was maybe the weekend before last. I don't actually even remember when it was now, but it was within the last week and a half. There was an in-state kid, Trey Curry, wide receiver, who announced his commitment to Tennessee on Instagram. And Matt Ray of VR2, he got to interview him, and what Curry said, I don't think I would have to go back and look at it. I don't think he mentioned that any specific coaches that he talked to, but he said he talked to someone. He told the coaches, told somebody on UT staff that he was going to do it, and that they were excited. But then we never saw any sort of public acknowledgement by Tennessee, by Jeremy Pruitt, by any nothing official ever came out. And now it just looks like Curry is not part of this class. So Brandon, I want to keep it kind of brief because I know it's kind of an awkward situation to talk about, and kind of awkward for both parties here, at Tennessee and Curry. But in your opinion, what exactly happened? Because I look at it as maybe there was some kind of mixed communications. Maybe Curry got the okay from someone who wasn't supposed to give him the okay, and he decided to make it public on Instagram. But then Tennessee was like, well, we're not ready exactly to make this public, ready to take your commitment at this time, and that we still want to evaluate you. I don't think Tennessee was ready to take his commitment. I think there was some sort of breakdown in communication there, and I'm going to be interested to see kind of what that relationship is like moving forward for Tennessee and Curry too.
This is one of the strangest things that has happened since I've been covering Tennessee. That's one of the strangest, most bizarre situations that I've had to cover. Trey Curry is a good athlete, very good athlete. Trey Curry can play multiple positions. He's got that versatility that Tennessee likes. I think he could help a team at wide receiver. He could help a team at running back. He could be that all-purpose back. I believe he could play corner. I believe he could play safety. I think he's got as far as versatility goes, it's very similar to Elijah Howard. I think this is a kid that can help you a lot of places that you need help. Several scouting services have got him rated as a 4-star player. He's in-state from down in Cleveland, Tennessee. He has, from what he told us, grew up a Tennessee fan. I think it's sort of what we've been talking about. I think it kind of ties into that. And you're going to see Tennessee pass on some guys that in the past they absolutely would have taken in a heartbeat. And I don't know that Trey Curry is not a take for this staff. I think they want to evaluate him just a little bit more. I think they want to see a little of his senior film. I think they want to see him maybe settle into a position or two or decide where they project him and want him, because numbers are going to be an issue with this class, and you're going to have to look at him and go, okay, what is he to us? Because are we full there, or do we need to bring someone on? I think the evaluation is going to be important. I don't know how this is going to impact that relationship, but I know Tennessee has been actively involved with Curry, and this is the second player we've seen put something out in this cycle that announced they were going to come to Tennessee, they were committing, and then go back on it and change it pretty shortly after it seems like the coaches didn't take the commitment. Not at that time. It's the second pretty darn good player we've seen him do that to. The first being the JUCO defensive tackle from East Mississippi. Last name is Gordon, I believe, whose film is excellent, by the way. Mm-hmm. I really truly felt like he was and should have been a take. And if Tennessee can get him in the boat and get him committed, I'm going to be ecstatic because he can play, and that's a position of need. So I'm hoping that I'd like to see things work out with Curry. I like to see Tennessee involved with the in-state kids, especially the guys that grew up Tennessee fans that have got the talent to help this team. And I think Curry does, but numbers are going to be tight on this class. You're not going to be able to take a lot of project guys. You're not going to be able to take a lot of guys without, especially at the wide receiver defensive back groups, you're going to have a home in this class for Tennessee. They can't take somebody and bring them into camp and not know what they're going to be this year. You can do that with a couple of guys, but not many.
Yeah, and we've talked about this before, you have a lot of guys in this class who are versatile, but that doesn't mean Tennessee, being versatile and not having a positional home are two different things. And, we talked about a lot of guys in this class, whether it's Terrence Lewis, or Cayman Marley, or heck, even Julian Nixon, Rock Taylor. Carmel Wilcoxon's another good example of these guys have a lot of positional versatility, but and Trinity Bell is another one too. But they have an ideal home where the staff feels good about them playing one or two different positions. And I agree with you on Curry and just some other guys who Tennessee's targeting too that maybe are lower down on their board. We don't know. We don't have access to what Tennessee's recruiting board looks like. Curry could be higher up, it could be lower down. I don't know, but I agree with you. I think having positional versatility, but then also not having a home are two different things. You can be a jack of all trades, master of none, or you can be a guy who is really good at two or three different positions, and it's just a matter of kind of finding which one you're going to fit better at in college. And I trust this staff with the guys they've coached in the past, and with the guys they've coached even at Tennessee so far, to do their best to find that home for a lot of these versatile kids. But I agree with you. Tennessee's not in a place right now to really take in a ton of projects exactly. So I think it's going to be interesting. Again, going back to the numbers game, how this all works out for Tennessee in this class and kind of what it does for the numbers and who they can and can't take moving forward. Speaking of in-state kids, Brandon, moving on from Curry to another in-state kid, Hudson Wolfe, the second best tight end in the state and one of the best prospects in the state of Tennessee, is going to be announcing his commitment. He said June 13th. We're recording this on the afternoon of June 11th. It could be anywhere between the 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th. Heck, it could even be later on today after we record this podcast with our luck, Brandon. That might be how it goes. But he's going to be announcing sometime soon. And I think it's interesting. It seemed for a while there, for months actually, even if you could look back to when he announced his top 5 teams at the end of March, I think it was March 28th, Steve Wiltfong, the director of recruiting for 247 Sports, put in a crystal ball prediction for Ohio State at the time, and Ohio State seemed to be the favorite for him for a while. And it seemed like Ohio State was making a big push, that they were definitely the team to beat. But then suddenly here in the last, really, I'd say a couple weeks, but especially here in this week, the last 3 or 4 days, Tennessee seems to have gotten a lot of the momentum, at least publicly. Behind the scenes, who knows how long this has been coming. But publicly, that these guys have been putting in crystal ball predictions. We've seen Wiltfong change his from Ohio State to Tennessee. We've seen both Grant Ramey and Ryan Callahan of 247 Sports that covers Tennessee put predictions in for Tennessee. And I can't remember his name, but there was an Ohio State guy who put in a prediction for Tennessee. Brandon, I think things are pointing for Tennessee's way, and unless something kind of happens between now and whenever he makes his commitment, I think Ole Miss is a legit threat as well. But I think Tennessee could be getting their really third tight end prospect of this class. And I think if they get Hudson Wolfe, it goes back to what we talked about when Trinity Bell committed. If they get Hudson Wolfe in the class and they have Miles Campbell in the class, I think you see your Trinity Bell potentially move to defensive end. So let's just discuss a little bit. You can give your thoughts on Tennessee's chances with Wolfe, and if they do get him, do you think Bell moves to the defensive side of the ball?
It's been interesting to watch the top 2 tight ends in the state of Tennessee this year are Jake Brenningstool at Ravenwood in Nashville, who's currently committed to Clemson, and Hudson Wolfe out at Hardin County in Savannah, Tennessee. They're the top 2 tight ends in the state. They are 2 of the top tight ends in the nation. I think 247 has got Brenningstool rated as the top player in the state of Tennessee. Rivals has Wolfe as the top-rated player in the state of Tennessee at any position. They're two of the best tight ends in the country. And I've gotten to see Hudson play a little bit. I've gotten to see Jake play a lot. And it, to me, it's very interesting because it's two different types of tight ends. Brenningstool is more of your flex out wide, basically playing as a big wide receiver. He's not going to line up in line much. He's not going to do a ton of blocking, and Clemson's not going to ask him to. Where Wolfe is your more traditional. He can get in line. He can line up as a wing. He's an asset in the run blocking game. He can pass block. He understands how to chip. He can come in and hold in protection for a couple seconds, then leak out, and does a good job of getting open on those routes, as well as running more traditional inline tight end routes. And he can bump out to the slot as well. Wolfe has been the guy that Jeremy Pruitt wanted from the beginning. This has been the guy in the state of Tennessee in this class that Tennessee has really, really, really pushed for a few years now. Wolfe has been the guy they wanted. And it really didn't. I think the last time we talked, actually, so I think it was the last time I was on here, we talked about where did we think Hudson Wolfe was going to go, and I said not Tennessee. I have not thought Tennessee was going to win this. It had seemed for a long time like Hudson was going to come down to Alabama or Ohio State. Really seemed like Ohio State there for a while. And in the last week especially, it seems like Tennessee has picked up a lot of momentum. Now this Hudson is one of the top targets Tennessee's got. I can't emphasize this enough. That's not even in state. That's period. Tennessee knew that tight end was a huge, huge, huge need in this class. They knew they had to get at least two. They really would have liked to have gotten a tight end in last class, and they didn't get a pure tight end. So you've got to hit this year. You had to hit. And they bet on being able to get Hudson, and it looked like they were going to miss, and now it's kind of sounding like they're going to pull this off. If they do this, Tennessee went head-to-head against Ohio State, Alabama, and Ole Miss to win this recruiting battle. And Ohio State and Alabama, especially with the kind of fire Ohio State has been on, that's a big pull. That's a big recruiting victory. If Tennessee gets Hudson Wolfe, he is exactly the kind of tight end that Jeremy Pruitt wants. He is that traditional tight end. He's able to do it all. He is already an asset as a blocker, which is so important to Jeremy Pruitt, but you can bump him out, and he's a dangerous receiver. He's a very polished tight end already. And if you get Hudson Wolfe, I think it almost certainly puts Trinity Bell on the defensive line as an end. Miles Campbell is a really, really athletic, really nice, I think underrated tight end prospect. We've heard comparisons to Evan Ingram that played at Ole Miss, now plays with the New York Giants on him. That's a very athletic tight end. I think Campbell's a really sneaky good, could be a big-time steal in this class kind of player. Wolfe is a very polished tight end. He's got everything that you need. These are two guys that can plug and play at a high level, the way Jeremy Pruitt wants them to. And Trinity Bell, whose tape at tight end is excellent, but who I've liked him as a defensive end a little more just because I love that 6'7" size, the wingspan, the length, the get off, and the athletic ability that he brings. You don't see a lot of 6'7", 250, 260 guys that can move like Bell can. And if you can put a little more weight on him, get him up to, say, 270, 280, well, that's going to be a nightmare coming off the edge in that 3-4 as an end, not as one of the outside linebackers. And I think that's where his tape shines a little better too. So if you're able to pull Hudson Wolfe, I think if you're Tennessee, you're looking at having the chance to improve your class in two different positions by moving Bell as well and helping your defensive line class too.
Yeah, Hudson Wolfe, 6'6", 240, and of course you also have Trey Bell, who's 6'7", 260. I mean, those are two huge bodies, and I agree with you. I think if Tennessee does get Wolfe, it moves Bell to the defensive end, and that, again, like you said, that kind of gives you some more added depth at two different positions, and two different positions Tennessee really needed to add some depth in this class. So I think, taking Bell makes sense in a lot of different areas. Heck, he's a guy that I think you all even talked about it too on VR2. I mentioned it in my impact analysis of him too. He's a guy who could maybe even bulk up and end up playing offensive tackle. I mean, he can add with a 6'7" frame, he can add another 30, 40 pounds and be okay and still be able to move and do that. It's just a matter of, does he feel comfortable with that? Can you teach him to do that if you want him to do that? That's another whole different ballgame. But that does kind of lead into our last topic here that I want to talk about. And speaking of Tennessee's offensive line, and that is, where does Tennessee go from here? Recruiting offensive line in this class, because we saw Dedrick Pennington, who Tennessee had been targeting, for a while, another in-state kid who we've talked about multiple times in this podcast. I know you're a big fan of his game. I like what he brings to the table. He can play offensive line, he can play defensive line. Pennington's just a really good athletic kid, 6'5", 326 pounds, down over in Cordova, where Tennessee obviously has pulled up a couple kids there before. He didn't include Tennessee in his list of top teams. And I think Pennington was kind of one of their bigger remaining offensive line targets, obviously outside of Amarius Mims. That's just kind of the obvious one there. You look at him, and he's I think the top, if not one of the top, offensive tackles in this class. But aside from Amarius Mims, which I still think is a Georgia lean at this point, or maybe Alabama even. I think Alabama and Georgia are probably ahead of Tennessee at this point, but Tennessee obviously is not going to give up there for Mims. Outside of Mims, Brandon, who else should Tennessee fans be looking at for, kind of where Tennessee's looking on the offensive line? Because I don't think Tennessee, they have Colby Smith currently committed, and I think he's a good kid. I like his ceiling. He's one you and I both talked about that he needs some more polish, and he's not probably going to be asked to come in and contribute immediately, and he probably won't have to come in and contribute immediately. But I look at, there's really only other two names I look at, in my opinion, for Tennessee targeting, and that is William Parker, who used to be William Griffin, over at Pearl Cone in Nashville, and then Diego Pounds is another guy. And those are the only two that I can really think of. Are those kind of the main two to watch for? Or is there someone else Tennessee fans should know about that Tennessee might be looking at on the offensive line? And can they get back into things with Dedrick Pennington, or is that kind of it's just not going to happen at this point?
At this time, I think Parker and Pounds are the two that you probably have the best shot with. I think those are the two big names to know. And then, of course, Mims as well. Here's the thing. We talked about Colby Smith. Love his size. He's raw. He's got, we talked pretty extensively about he's rated as highly as he is because of his potential. And he's a kid that could develop into a good player, I believe. I think he's got all the tools and the attitude and the coaches to do that, but he's still got to do it. Diego Pounds out of North Carolina is sort of the opposite of that, in my opinion. Not that he's not got a great attitude, but that I think Diego Pounds is ready to play right now. This kid is better than his rating, a lot better than his rating. His tape is superb. He is a very good pass blocker. He's a very good run blocker. Very intelligent on the field and off. You're talking about a young man who's got offers to at least Princeton, and I think Harvard has offered him as well. So very intelligent young man. I think 6'6", 305. Moves his feet very, very well. Uses his hands well. His technique is sharp. Really punches out when he goes into pass protection. Good run blocker. He gets upfield. He gets to the second level. And he doesn't get to the second level by coming out of his stance and avoiding the end. He gets to the second level by smacking the end to the ground and then going to get a linebacker or a safety. Very, very good player. I really, really am high on Pounds. I really like his film a lot. And I think he's ready to come in and play early if that's what they need him to do. I think he is physically and mentally prepared to do that. And I feel the same way about William Parker was William Griffin. Folks have heard me talk about him before, but I'm a big fan of Griffin's game. I really like what I see from him. I think Pounds is a left tackle. I think Pounds could play either tackle, but I think Pounds is better suited as a left tackle. I think William Parker's a right tackle. He has got in run blocking, he's got a mean streak 2 feet wide. Like, this is a guy that if he gets a hold of you, it's a bad day, because you're going for a ride and it's going to end with you getting slammed and about 320 pounds full of man falling down on you. He is a road grader, man. When Pearl-Cohn needs a hole, that's the side they run to. And much like people heard me talk about with Elijah Simmons, who also came out of Pearl-Cohn, I don't know what it is in the water at Pearl-Cohn, but they're big guys. Their whole team is conditioned like very few high school teams I've ever seen. That whole team just does not fade, but especially their big guys. You're talking about cats playing at 310, 320, 330, playing every snap both ways. And the film in the fourth quarter looks the same as the film in the first quarter. I thought Parker was a really valuable target for Tennessee because I felt like he could play anywhere on the defensive line for Tennessee, including the nose tackle spot. And I felt like he could play right tackle on the offensive line. With some of the commitments Tennessee has gotten, with some of the targets they're still in on, I feel better about Parker being on the offensive line. But I'm going to tell you, if you got Pounds, Parker, Colby Smith, that's not a bad O-line haul. Especially when you look at the interior linemen they brought in last class, and the fact that most of these guys are going to get at least 1 year to get ready to play. Now, I think Mims is still on the table, and obviously, if you can get Amarius Mims, he's the number 2 player in the nation on 247. If you can get him, he has a spot. Tennessee didn't make the top 5 for Pennington. I think that hurts because I think Pennington is a very versatile offensive lineman. I think I like him a little better at guard. He can play tackle. I think he may be just a little slow playing tackle, but he's so incredibly strong when you put him inside that he just wrecks people on the interior of the line and just creates holes. I think I like him a little better as a guard. I don't think Tennessee's done there. And we've talked at length on this podcast before about how Tennessee's coaches have not always been the best about taking no for an answer. And they'll stay right on a kid. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't, but it has panned out for them in the past. I don't see them giving up on Pennington just yet. Now they may do it later on down the road if he has truly shut this down and is not interested in having them. But I don't look for Tennessee to quit there just yet.
Yeah, I do. I don't think they'll quit, but I agree with you. I think it's going to be kind of a long haul there for them. Speaking of Parker and Pounds, I think both these kids are due for recruiting boost. I think I wrote an article on our site, RockyTopInsider.com, that I think it was Charles Power of 247 listed Miles Campbell as one of the 4 or 5 tight ends who are going to get big bumps because their next update is going to be later this month. I can't remember what exactly it was. I think June 17th, but it's looking more at the offensive players, whereas the last update was more about defensive players. But I think both Parker and Pounds are getting bumps because yes, they're kind of in the 40s in the offensive tackle. They're both kind of inside the top 400 or top 500 just by a little bit right now. But you look at their offer sheet; they both have offers from Alabama, Auburn, and LSU. Parker has also an offer from Ohio State, from Georgia, from Oklahoma as well. Pounds has one from LSU, from Penn State, from Florida, and from Miami, from Michigan, from all kinds of different schools. As you mentioned, he's got offers from Princeton as well, and also from Oregon, and just all these different teams. UCLA also offered him I think somewhat recently too. Look at that offer list, and that's better than a kind of mid-tier 3-star offer list. So I think both those guys, not that the ratings matter or anything like that, but I think both those guys are going to move up. And I don't know that they'll get their 4th star for both of them, but I think you're going to see them move into the top 400 for sure and be higher rated than what they are now. So if all fans out there are worried about Tennessee, getting tackles that aren't rated very high or whatever, I think both Pounds and Parker they've flown under the radar long enough. I think both of them are they're due for a jump. They're due to move into the top 40, top 35, maybe top 30 tackles in this class. And I think both those guys are very good prospects along with you, Brandon. That kind of ends it here. We won't have a commitment to talk about in this podcast, but we had a lot to discuss. There's several other things I wanted to get to, Brandon, that we just don't have time to, because there's just a lot to cover even without a commit to talk about over the last couple weeks. So it feels weird not having an official commitment. We talked about Trey Curry, but it feels weird not having an official commitment to talk about over the last couple weeks, because we got so used to guys committing every week, and sometimes every 2 or 3 days, sometimes every single day we get any commitment for Tennessee. But you may see one this weekend with Hudson Wolfe, depending on when he does it, and whether or not things change between now and then. But that's going to be kind of another good boost for Tennessee if he does commit. So hopefully that'll happen. Obviously, keep an eye out for that for both of us at VR2 and Rocky Top Insider. We'll have coverage of that. But Brandon, is there anything else on VR2 that you want the listeners to know about you guys have on the site currently? Do you have that you guys have coming down the site soon? Just let everybody know kind of where they can find you guys and what you guys have coming and what you guys have on the site right now.
Yep. If you want to check out our work, it's at si.com/college/Tennessee. We actually have an interview up, interview that was done in the last week with William Parker. It was a really good interview that Matt got a chance to do. We have that up. So, we've been talking about him. You can see what he says about where his recruitment's at, where things are going with him right now. We do our best, of course, to cover any kind of news that breaks around the football program, recruiting news. So, whenever Hudson Wolfe does decide to announce, we're going to be ready to cover that with as much content as we have prepared to keep you updated, let you know what Tennessee is getting, or let you know where Wolfe has decided to go otherwise. But we're also doing it's more than football. We try to keep up with our basketball coverage as much as we can, keep you up to date on everything going on there. Baseball as well. Vols had a first round pick last night. Left-handed pitcher on the way to the White Sox. So good. I guess good for the baseball program to be getting that first round pick, but kind of hurts the rotation going into next year, because this Tennessee baseball team getting shorted out of the season, man. That hurts, because that team looked like they were ready to be world beaters.
Yeah, I agree. I was very excited to watch Tennessee baseball this season. I hate that they got cut short. I still think next year could be a really good team too, but it just had that feeling of potentially being something special this season, and I was really looking forward to seeing what they could do in SEC play. But obviously we didn't get to know. We'll never know. But I hope next year Tennessee can build off that strong momentum they had at the beginning of this year, and with the still recruiting very well. Tony Vitello is giving Rick Barnes and Jeremy Pruitt a run for their money for best recruiter at Tennessee right now, and heck, even Kelly Harper's doing a really good job recruiting too. So Tennessee's recruiting at all cylinders in their 4 major sports right now, which you love to see it. But thank you for that plug, and thank you again, Brandon, for joining me on the podcast as a special guest for the Recruiting Podcast here. You can find them at VR2 on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I think actually Twitter's @_VR2_, but you can just search VR2 and they'll probably pop up on all of those. You can find us at Rocky Top Insider. We're on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. A lot of you listen to the podcasts on YouTube, so we appreciate that. Give it a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and you can find us at RockyTopInsider.com as well. Signing off for Brandon, I am Nathaniel. Thank you all for listening. This has been another episode of the RTI Recruiting Podcast.